Anybody out there heard about that new kind of fake spaghetti that's going around? It's total impasta, just total impasta. Again, I know how continuing ed days can be. I've sat through many of them myself. They're long days, so thank you all for your patience. Okay, we're going to start on slide 9, I believe. Okay. So if you're trying to find it and you don't have the page numbers, it's the one that has abstract status at the top. So we've been speaking about Gateway Abstract for a year and a half, 2 years now, at these conferences, at a lot of individual meetings with county auditors, ton of emails, ton of communication about it. This is an ongoing project in partnership between our office, DLGF, and with the Auditor of State's office. It is a big project when it comes to changing the way that the abstract is submitted and data is pulled together. The abstract itself is a really unique document. I actually, just on a personal anecdote, I happen to remember when I took my job at DLGF back in early 2014, my predecessor from the first position I took at the agency sent me a copy of the abstract, of an Excel abstract, and said, if you can understand this thing, then that gives you a pretty good sense of property taxes. And it took me a long time to catch on to what he meant by that. But as kind of months went by after I got into the job and I really understood what the abstract was, that honestly is the case. Because the abstract has a breakdown of assessed values at a taxing district level, both at a gross and a net level. It's got levies and rates. It's got TIF information on it, credit amounts, it's delinquencies and penalties. It's a really comprehensive document that combines property taxes from an individual's perspective and property taxes from a taxing unit perspective. Which is all to say that transitioning it to a new form of submission is a big project. So we've been working in partnership with all of you toward that project. We made the call as partner agencies this past December and January that for one more year we were going to stick with the Excel abstract, and our goal with that was to have as many counties as possible submit data through Gateway so that we could test it, see how it works, make adjustments, or advise you all on adjustments that are needed, so that we could go live with this thing with confidence in 2019, knowing that the abstract works like we want it to, and that's 100% the plan. We have every intent of going live with Gateway Abstract as the official abstract in 2019. You all did a wonderful job, and we can't thank you enough for the time that you put in and the effort you put in to generate the Gateway Abstract files and to upload them into the file, into our system. We've used that extensively for testing over the last few weeks and the last month or so. And it's proving incredibly useful. I'm going to talk to you about some of our findings so far, things that we know that we need to update, some of our upcoming development, things that we're going to be working with some of you on and some of your vendors on. So I'm going to kind of break it down section by section, starting with the file upload. Broadly speaking, the file upload worked as we expected it to. With one exception, and that is especially if you're in a larger county with a lot of parcels, we do know the file upload takes a pretty good amount of time to process. For a small county, it may be a minute or so, but for a large county, we could be talking minutes, as in you may want to step away from your computer after you upload it, get some coffee and do something else and then come back. There's a few things on that. We are working on ways to streamline it. It's processing a ton of data. I mean, it's tens of thousands of parcels. For large counties, so it's going to take some time. We're working on ways to streamline it. It's also sitting on a test server or development server right now, and not on the same production server that we use for most Gateway applications. When we get it moved up to there, I think that it is going to speed things up a little bit. So that is something that we're working on. But by and large, the file upload did take the files that you all generated and it converted them into Gateway abstract values. I'm going to move through this set of slides pretty quickly because you've probably seen them before if you've seen a Gateway abstract presentation. But the contents of Gateway Abstract are generated based upon data that's in your tax and bill software. And you're producing 7 files that we've specified in partnership with you and with your vendors to generate those files. The first 2 are 2 files that you've created for many years. They are the tax data file and the adjustments file. In a nutshell, these 2 files are the contents of the property tax bills. You've submitted them to DLGF and LSA for many years. Additional files that we're having folks create are the AbTax SUP, which stands for Abstract Tax Data Supplemental file. It collects some delinquency and penalty information that's not already in the tax data and adjustments files. We've got an AbCert Rate file. If that sounds familiar, it's because Cert Rate is a file that you receive from our office with your budget order each year. You take that file and import it into your local software, and that's how you have your tax rates that are ready to go for property tax bill calculation. We have a TIF summary file, which is used to tell us which TIF districts are in place in the county. TIF tax file, which is one of the most crucial. This one is the intersection of individual TIF districts or the allocation areas and the individual tax bills. And finally, the TIF tax supplemental file, which works like the abstract tax supplemental file, providing some additional data. We chose to break it out into its own file to try to match the format between the normal tax data file and the TIF data that we were collecting. So we're going to get into a few of the individual sections that are on both Gateway Abstract and the Excel Abstract and talk about some of the things that we're seeing. The assessed values is the first section. If you can picture the Excel Abstract, it's what you see on the leftmost side after you get through the tax and district name and tax and district numbers. In the same way on Gateway Abstract, once you get through the file upload, this is the first set of screens that you're likely to go to. So you're going to compare, the best comparison that I can come up with is the AV summary screen to section 1 of the Excel Abstract. So this year, based upon the data that was uploaded through Gateway Abstract and comparing it to what was in the Excel files, by and large, the data matched. We had a few counties that had some differences, but by and large, it matched, which is good, and that was our expectation. A couple of things that we saw, there was at least one county, maybe a small handful of counties, where state assessed data appeared not to come through in either the Excel Abstract or Gateway Abstract quite correctly, and we're not entirely sure which one yet. I will say, too, that this is going to be an ongoing theme of this discussion. When there are differences between the 2 files, by default, we're going to tend to think of the Excel Abstract as being the one that's correct because it's been around for a period of years, but we don't actually always know that's the case. And at times, there are reasons to think that what you've uploaded through Gateway Abstract, where it differs from the Excel file, that the Gateway data is actually the correct one because it's at a more detailed level. But in any case, there's every time we find these differences, we're trying to break them down and figure out what caused a difference between the 2 and what can we do to reconcile that for future years. We also had a few cases where TIF assessed values appeared to what we saw in the TIF tax file didn't quite match up with what we would have expected to see for values to line up with the Excel Abstract. But again, on AV issues, they were mostly few and far between. For most counties, what you had in Gateway lined up pretty closely with the Excel file. Levies and rates is the next section. This is on the Excel Abstract. It's sections 2 through 4. And in Gateway, we've got quite a few screens that pertain to rates and levies, broken out at the taxing district level, broken out at the taxing unit level, the fund level within taxing districts, with a lot of different ways to look at it. But largely, you can do a comparison between Excel sections 2 through 4 and Gateway Abstracts rate and levy sections. This is not going to typically match, or it's frequently not going to match one-to-one, and we did that by design. So the key difference is on the Excel Abstract, the levy section that you're looking at in section 2 through 4 already factors out circuit breaker amounts, and we made a conscious decision when we were designing Gateway Abstract that we were going to design what was the equivalent of sections 2 through 4 to be pre-circuit breaker and then subtract off circuit breaker amounts at a later point. So we ultimately get to the exact same ending values, in terms of what the post-circuit breaker levy amount is going to be for an individual unit and fund, but we're going at it in a slightly different order. So there are going to be times where, by design, we see a difference between the Excel amount and between what we see in Gateway Abstract. If you're going through and trying to compare them yourself, and you want to talk about those differences, please reach out. I'm totally happy to talk with you about why we did it that way and how we can reconcile it, tell that we actually are getting the same amounts. Largely, I think that we generally are. The circuit breaker amounts were reported pretty consistently on the Excel abstract and on Gateway Abstract. So in the same way with levies, tax rates is something that we can compare between the Excel abstract and between Gateway. And the tax rates in the abstract files are designed to match the certified rates. And the only difference that I can think of would be for phase-in districts. And there aren't that many counties around the state that have a phase-in or set of phase-in districts. But if you do, that's the one case where on the budget order, you're going to receive one full certified rate for the taxing units and for the taxing districts. And the rate's going to differ when it's uploaded into Gateway Abstract. And that's actually the exact same as the Excel abstract. You go in and you end up modifying those rates within the abstract so that you're using the phased-in rate as opposed to the full rate. We designed validation in Gateway Abstract to require that the rates that you upload match the certified rates, and our intent behind that is to make sure that the data that's in your tax software and what's ultimately going to be used for the computation of tax bills matches with the rates that were actually certified for your taxing units and your taxing districts. So for credit amounts, circuit breaker credits were good between Gateway Abstract and the Excel abstract for most counties. They matched in exactly the way that we'd expect they would. Local income tax credits were good for one half, and we struggled a little bit with the other half. So for the impact to individual taxing units, the piece of property tax relief that ends up going to the taxing districts, we did see pretty good values there, what we expected. For some counties, the property tax relief amounts didn't come through for the TIF upload, and that would have come from the TIF tax supplemental file. So we're going to be working with counties where that was the case to make sure that we have those amounts correct and correctly broken out between taxing districts and units and between the individual TIF districts. This won't have a tax bill impact. The property tax relief credit percentage is the same, but it could ultimately have an impact by the time we get to calculation of circuit breaker adjusted rates, and it would ultimately impact settlement. So that's an item to work through. It's one that we're aware of, and we're going to be in contact with counties and with vendors to make sure that we're consistent in the way that data is reported. So the comparison between credits for credits, we're going to look at columns 2 through 5, which is going to be circuit breaker on the Excel abstract, and then 10 through 17, which is your property tax relief credits, and we can compare those to the credits details screen within Gateway. And then penalties and delinquencies. So this is the area that we did see the most inconsistency when comparing Gateway Abstract to the Excel abstract, and there's not a great pattern for it. This spread across many counties, many taxing districts, and we've yet to piece together exactly what's causing the difference, but we are hard at work on figuring that out. There is one thing that is key, and that is, so the Excel abstract by design excludes mobile properties, so you don't see mobile assessed values in section 1, and then it doesn't kind of have that cascading impact on the levies in sections 2 through 4. But that's not true for prior year delinquencies, basically. If you have prior year delinquencies on mobile properties, those do appear today on the Excel abstract, and our intent is to match that on Gateway Abstract. We took a really broad approach this year and said mobile properties, don't count them. So that's something that we already are in the process of fixing, and actually it may already be up there between when I put these slides together and talk with our team about getting that squared away. But But there are other items on penalties and delinquencies that we're still trying to figure out exactly why they were different between the two different versions of the abstract, the Excel abstract and the Gateway abstract. But if you want to do the comparison for penalties and interest, you'd be looking at columns 19 through 22 in section 5 of the Excel file, and comparing that to the delinquencies, to the penalties and interest detail in Gateway. The county review section is an item that we rolled out this year for use by counties. Some counties have used it, some counties haven't, and that's okay because we didn't ask everybody to do it. We'd love it if you would. If you've not gone through the county review section and you have time in between settlement and CNAV over the next couple months, I do think it's a valuable exercise. It gets you used to something that you're going to see when we roll out Gateway Abstract as the official production abstract next year. What we're doing with the county review section is trying to catch big changes and just make sure that we have an explanation for them. So this year we did a comparison between assessed values from CNAV and assessed values from the abstract. And there's a difference in assessed values that's by design. So many counties, or even most counties, choose to withhold 2% of their assessed value at CNAV time or something up to 2%. Some counties choose to do less. We also know there are deduction applications that come in and appeals that are resolved and that sort of thing. So there's going to be a difference between CNAV and the actual values that are used for tax bills and in turn the abstract. But we're looking for significant changes between the two. And if there are big changes, we're asking that you take a look at it and just provide us a comment or an explanation saying that, yes, this is legitimate. We had some sort of change. So we set the threshold at 10%. But one thing that we've been looking at and talking about, since we kind of came up with the idea of Gateway Abstract, was making this a customizable tool. So what might make sense as a comparison for a large county or a county with many parcels or a high amount of assessed value, not necessarily apples to apples with a relatively small county. Those percentage differences are going to be different for those different county sizes. So we're looking at ways to give you options to set that threshold at something besides 10%, if that's what makes the most sense for you when you're doing your review. We also have a piece of Gateway Abstract that requires county auditors or somebody working on the abstract to view certain pages. So we're asking you to, after you've uploaded the files, view the AVs, view the tax rates, view the levies, view the credits. Make sure that they match up with what you're expecting them to display. That's going to continue to be part of the abstract moving forward. That's one of the really key parts that we think is going to play a role in making the abstract successful, because it provides an avenue through which we ask auditors to really take a look at and process and understand the data that's been uploaded, because it's ultimately your data and it represents what's on the tax bills. And if we think about the abstract philosophically, this is one of the very last steps before tax bills go out the door. And this is an opportunity to catch mistakes before they're made. So that's going to continue to be a piece of it. If you haven't done the county review section, I'd encourage you to hop into Gateway and check that piece out. Relative to uploading files, this is probably going to be a pretty quick process for you. It may be just a matter of minutes to complete that. Okay, finally, just a little bit of upcoming development on Gateway Abstract. Report outputs, circuit breaker adjusted rates. So the same rates that you receive from the Auditor of State's office that you can use in settlement, we're going to build those in through Gateway Abstract. Our vision for that is to come up with a text file that would be in the exact same format as the certed rates file or the abcert rate file. So it'll list the county and taxing district and taxing unit type and unit, and then a circuit breaker adjusted rate. And our vision is to give you a copy of that file that you can then import right back into your tax and bill software, and you won't be in the business of typing circuit breaker adjusted rates. Error message refinement, this is common feedback that we receive. And then a comprehensive abstract manual giving folks guidance on what's in the abstract, how we invite you to use it, the kinds of data that you're looking at, and what it's designed to mean. So again, I just want to, and I'm going to transition to Bob in just a moment to talk about this year's abstract, but I do want to, before we wrap up, just thank you one more time Software development is difficult. We do a lot of it at our office in terms of all the different budget applications or the gateway applications that you've seen have all gone through a process like this one. Internal software that we build all goes through a process like this one. But we have a really unique opportunity with this one to take advantage of the level of testing that you've all facilitated for us. So in total sincerity, we really appreciate all of your efforts so far on Gateway Abstract. Through your partnership, we're going to make this a successful rollout for 2019. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Bob to finish us up.
Thanks, Matt. So I have to say the gummy bear joke, I'm still laughing about that. That was a good one. No, didn't think about the fact I'm the last presenter of the day. I don't have any good jokes for you guys, but I can promise my section is going to be pretty quick. I just want to take a few minutes to kind of just go over you with everyone really quickly, kind of the results and how successful this year's abstract season was. A lot of you may not know me quite yet because this is my first time being at an auditors conference. I didn't come to the Auditor of State's office until late November, the first Monday after Thanksgiving, and I came in as the new local government division director, so I'm kind of just learning the things as we go. But the one thing I just wanted to point out was that all 92 counties submitted their abstracts to us by March 15th, which was the deadline. To me, that was great. Give yourselves a hand. You made me look good, so I appreciate that. There were bumps and problems along the way, but we all met the deadline. That's all that mattered. The last one came in on the 15th, but it was still the 15th. So I thought I'd just take a few minutes to kind of go through the process and kind of just hit the stats on when things were turned in, go over some common problems, questions, and so forth. In my mind, there was kind of three main steps in the abstract. You had your beginning step was when we asked you to do your pre-abstract survey. Second step for 62 of the counties, or 61 of the counties, you had to do a property tax relief workbook. Then you actually had to do your actual abstract. This year, for the pre-abstract survey, was the first time that we asked everyone to fill out your pre-abstract survey in Gateway instead of the Excel document I was told existed before. I wasn't here, so I never saw it. Two main questions that popped up when everyone did their pre-abstract survey were questions on their property tax relief allocations and phase-in and MTEs. For property tax relief allocations, I don't know if everyone remembers, we asked you to actually fill in your allocation for each of the 5 different buckets. A lot of times people ask, how do I go back, how do I find out what it is, how do I know if it changed and what happened and so forth. Right now, being the last period of the day, I didn't want to get too in-depth with this. I'm going to go into this a lot more deep tomorrow during my settlement talk. The other question was phase-ins and MTEs. Phase-in and MTEs always connect to annexations that happen throughout the years within your counties. We always recommend going back to the original annexation ordinances and finding out what language was stated in there. People in our office, DLGF, we're always willing to help talk you through and get you through any questions you have in the phase-ins. A lot of times it's kind of a basis-by-basis issue and problems that we'll work you through. As for the timeline of when items were submitted for your pre-abstract survey, it initially went live on January 25th. We actually received submissions on that day. The average date that people submitted was on February, I can't read that, February 3rd, 2018, so about 2 days from the original submission. And we received our final submission on February 10th, so a 17-day turnaround to have all 92 counties submitted, which was in line with our expectations, and we were really happy with those results. Oops. Next, we were just going to talk about your property tax relief workbook for the 61 counties that it's for the 61 counties who do have property tax relief. This is a workbook that must be completed prior to completing your abstract. That's because your property tax relief rate that's calculated from your workbook is used to compute your property tax relief credits in the taxing districts that's allocated to. Our first submission for this was on February 7th. On average, we received most of these workbooks by February 23rd. Our final submission was received on March 12th. For the most part, from the submission, our turnaround was about 24 hours when our office was able to either accept or reject any submission and just suggest any review changes. The number of submissions, it was on average, it took about each county 1.41 times to submit. Obviously, you can't submit something 1.4 times. That's just on the math. It was 1 to 2 times, which I was very happy with seeing that 93% of the counties were able to get their property tax relief workbook cleared by their second submission. So that just says there's a small, for the people who didn't clear their relief workbook with the first submission, by the second time we had all questions answered and able to move on. Here too, your day count. There were select counties who actually, on what the day count's looking at is from the time you submit your first property tax relief workbook, how many days did it take to have AOS approve the relief workbook that was submitted? In some counties, you saw the day it was submitted, so 0 day count, meaning the day you submitted, we gave you approval that day. On average, you saw a 10-day full process from the date first submitted to the date receiving final approval. The longest process we saw was a 29-day process. Give or take, it's hard to say when everyone would expect yours. There's different unique problems that come up with each county. One thing just to remember is everyone submitted on time. So here I just wanted to move on to abstracts. I hit again, once again, all 92 counties submitted before March 15th. Very happy about that. The first abstract was submitted to our office on February 13th. The first approval was given on February 15th. So we kind of started in the beginning of February, wrapped up in the end of March. On average, most counties submitted and received their approval in the beginning of March, kind of in that March 3rd to March 10th time period. Here too, the number of submissions or resubmissions was relatively low. It took about 1.75 times for each county to receive final approval, which yet again is a 1 or 2 times. You'll see 41 counties received final approval after the initial submission. An additional 35 counties received after the second submission, and only 14 or 2 counties took 3 or 4. There were no counties that required over 4 submissions, so it was a relatively smooth and quick process. Kind of like the property tax relief workbook for the proper abstracts, I kind of looked at a day count. I was just curious to see on average, from the date a county received their abstract, how many days was it taking to receive, complete, and go through the full review process. On average, the process took about 12 days, which was from the time you received your abstract to the time we gave you final approval. So around 2 weeks, which I thought was a pretty good timeline. Approval was given on about 48 hours from the submission. So the time you submitted your abstract to AOS for approval, it took us about 48 hours to do our initial review and get back with any initial questions. And finally, I just wanted to go through just kind of 2 main items that we kind of saw repeatedly throughout the abstract, kind of review type questions and thresholds. The first thing was for changes in NSS value and TIF. We looked at changes greater than 20%. One thing we just ask going forward, now this is going to change with going to the gateway review, is that just to think about that and be cognizant of that before you start your process of any major changes, just so you can be prepared and ready to answer those type of questions. And the more detailed you can be in your response, the better. Try to stay away from one word, new construction, or one word answers, and try to go in just a little more depth. If there was a new construction, what was a new construction, and so forth. The other item we ran into or we see, and I just wanted to bring to light, are funds that are excluded from TIF, primarily fire protection districts, which had created a few problems here and there with counties that have them. And just going forward, you just try to be a little more cognizant and pay attention to what taxing districts, if there is a TIF in a fire district. The difficulty that we face when reviewing is we're not as familiar with some of the areas, so we don't know when there's a fire district. So we may come back with a few extra questions going forward, trying to catch these kind of on the front end, so the problem doesn't create where you're overstating, or the abstract doesn't show an overstatement of TIF revenues being generated when actually there's maybe a 20-cent tax rate included in there that should not be captured by TIF because it should be going to the fire district. So I promise to keep this quick and clean. In about 10 minutes, I'm already ready to wrap up. So I hope everyone enjoyed my quick abstract review, and everyone have a great day.